Hello everyone, I'm Hone, and it is Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. This time we're looking at a mechanic that is returning in Ixalan double-faced cards. Since it's returning, I wanted to sort of look at, before cards from Ixalan end up on this list, I wanted to look at what the 10 best double-faced cards were so far. Players really love this mechanic based on all the research that Wizards does, and it originally debuted in Innistrad. Cards that are double-faced are generally some type of creature or other permanent that can undergo a transformation or a change that changes what they are drastically, and as a result, this is one of the more flavorful mechanics around. Now let's look at the 10 double-faced cards that have seen the most play at Magic's highest level. Cards receive points on these lists depending on how many Grand Prix or Pro Tour Top 8s they receive. I also include Legacy and Vintage Championship events as Pro Tour Top 8s so that those events can be properly represented in the score of the cards. So let's look at number 10. Number 10, we have Thing in the Ice, a 2-mana 0/4 who, after you get 4 ice counters off of it by casting instants and sorceries, transforms into a 7/8 that bounces all non-horror creatures, which usually just means everything but itself. This is a nice win condition for control decks since they already run a ton of spells, as it can block for you early and transform into a win condition later. In Standard, it found its way into Izzet Control and Grixis Control, and in Modern, it has found its way into Blue Moon, Taking Turns, and Kiln Fiend. While it is about to rotate out of Standard, the fact that it has already seen play in Modern is a great sign that it will continue to put up some points. At number 9, we have Lambholt Pacifist, a 2-mana 3/3 with a really interesting design. It is sort of a 2-mana 3/3 with a downside since it can't attack unless you have a big enough creature, but it also has the upside of just transforming into a 4/4 if the usual werewolf thing happens, that is, if someone decided to cast 0 spells during their turn. This was a well-costed aggressive creature, and as a result, it saw a ton of play when it was in Standard. When it first came into Standard, this meant Selesnya tokens, but later it emerged as one of the core creatures in Standard Bant Company decks since it provided a well-costed body that could also be a hit for Collected Company. While Collected Company is a thing in Modern, Lambholt Pacifist doesn't see any play in those decks, as there are just better options in that format. When it rotates out of Standard here in a few weeks, it probably won't see play ever again, and some of the new double-faced cards in Ixalan might have a shot at overtaking it. Speaking of Bant Company, at number 8 we have another mainstay in the deck, and man is it a powerful uncommon. Duskwrath Recruiter. A 2-mana 2/2 who can be a pretty nice mana sink, sort of doing a mini Collected Company effect, all on its own with its activated ability. It was a good fit in the deck simply because it was a 2/2 with upside that Collected Company could put into play, but that activated ability brings some additional synergy to a deck that is already pretty interested in toolboxy creatures. When it transforms, it only gets a little bigger, but it also decreases the cost of your creature spells. Both sides of this are appealing in aggressive decks. It saw play almost exclusively in Collected Company decks in Standard, though it saw a bit of play in the short-lived Cryptolith Right decks as well. Unlike Lambholt Pacifist, Duskwrath Recruiter is seeing play in modern Collected Company decks, the creature toolbox version especially, which runs Court of Calling in addition to Collected Company. It is likely to continue to see play there for the same reasons that it was good in Standard. It also sort of enables you to toolbox creatures because you get to pick between 3 cards off the top of your library. At number 7, we have the first Planeswalker to make the list, but not the last, Garruk Relentless, who transforms into Garruk the Veil-Cursed. Killing a 2/2 with Garruk Relentless and flipping him into Garruk the Veil-Cursed was a pretty common play pattern, and obviously, once your Garruk's loyalty is only at 1, you need to get it back up. The wolves he makes, after he transforms into Garruk the Veil-Cursed, provide excellent protection as your opponent is forced to attack into the Death Touch creatures if they want to try to take down Garruk. Obviously, he could do other things too, making wolves every turn on the Relentless side, or using the tutor effect or board pumping effect of the Veil-Cursed happens too, but if you were playing a Garruk, you should probably make sure you have a stack of 1/1 Death Touch Wolf tokens, because you'll be making a lot of them. Garruk was one of the best cards in Innistrad block, as illustrated by the fact that it managed 6 top 8s at Pro Tour Avacyn Restored, the block constructed Pro Tour for Innistrad. This was in basically any aggressive green deck in Standard, like Bant aggro, Green-White aggro, and Naya aggro. He also saw play in Mono Green aggro and Reanimator and Red Green Control, where the fact that you were filling your graveyard made Garruk the Veil-Cursed -3 ability quite potent. Garruk also saw some play in Modern, managing 2 Grand Prix top 8s at Grand Prix Turin and 2 Rug Delver decks back in 2012. Even Legacy hasn't been safe from Garruk, as he's put up a few Grand Prix top 8s there as well in Maverick, and he's actually managed top 16s in Legacy more recently, primarily in bug control decks, so it's possible he receives some more points from Legacy in the near future, but as of right now, he hasn't seen a top 8 in any Grand Prix or Pro Tour since 2013. At number 6, we have the only land to make the list. Westvale Abbey and Ormondal have appeared on an MTG Top 10 several times before, and I believe it's now tied with both Spellskite and Hangerback Walker for the most appearances on MTG Top 10 at 4. As a land, Westvale Abbey has a leg up over lots of other cards on this list, because for the last couple of years, any deck that is running a bunch of creatures in Standard runs the Abbey, because it is a land that turns into an incredibly difficult to deal with creature who provides 18 points of life swing just with one hit. The decks that have run him in Standard are exactly those decks that run a ton of creatures or ways to make creature tokens, such as Selesnya tokens, Abzan Company, Golgari Aristocrats, and White Weenie. The Abbey also has a lone modern Grand Prix Top 8, and because there's so little downside in including this card in your deck, I imagine we'll see more of it in the future, even after it rotates. At number 5, we have Nissa Vastwood Seer, one of the flip planeswalkers from Magic Origins. Nissa is great because she makes sure you don't miss a land drop, and then later in the game she transforms into a powerful planeswalker who can either make 4/4 tokens, though keep in mind that token is legendary so you can only make one at a time, or she can draw you cards. Her ultimate is a type of ultimate that can automatically win games too. Nissa saw play in everything from mid-range to controlling decks that had green in them when she was in Standard. This meant she showed up in the powerful Abzan decks along cards like Siege Rhino, but also in the green-white Megamorph decks running the Maternal Witness, Death Mist Raptor Engine. She also showed up in the season's past control decks, and once Collected Company became the most powerful card in Standard, she benefited off of being able to be hit by that powerful spell. Not many cards that are planeswalkers can. I mean, a lot of the other flipwalkers can, but it's still pretty unique. In short, she showed up all over the place in Standard. Her strong resume was completely obtained in that format, though, and she has yet to break through in Modern or other formats, so it doesn't look like she'll be adding to her resume anytime soon. At number 4, we have Huntmaster of the Fells, which is just a ridiculous card. Even just the front half of the card, 4 mana for 2/2/2s and 2 life, would probably have been good enough to see a bit of play. But he's a werewolf, so he transforms if people don't cast spells, and when he does, he gets to shock a creature and a player. Then, when he transforms back, he gives you the wolf and life again, and he just goes back and forth between giving you one of these nice abilities every time he transforms, and he's going to be transforming. It just sort of naturally happens during games anyway. Generally, if your opponent plays Huntmaster and you can't kill it, you're probably going to lose the game. He was one of the best creatures in all of Innistrad Block, as evidenced by the fact that it managed 4 Pro Tour top 8s at the Innistrad Block Constructed Pro Tour, and he was also one of the best creatures in all of Standard, appearing in decks like Green-Red Aggro, which were Green-Red largely because of him, Kessig Titan, and Nyapod. He has also been good enough for Modern, where he's primarily appeared in Jund decks with a Grand Prix top 8 in that format in that deck, as recently as earlier this year in 2017. He was also a sideboard card in some versions of Splinter Twin before that got banned, and he'll continue to see play in Modern, so it's likely he continues to add to his score. At number 3, we have another Flipwalker, Jace Vryn's Prodigy. If I ever get around to doing a top 10 on the cards that were the most underrated by the community during spoiler season, Jace would perhaps be number 1 on the list. The community consensus was just that he wasn't good enough, and that he might be another mediocre Jace like Jace the Living Guild Pack. Turns out we, and I include myself in this because I was in on this prediction as well, were all wrong, and Jace was pretty busted while he was in Standard. I'm not really sure how we got it so wrong. Control decks were happy to have the looting effect he provides on the front, and he was not very difficult to flip on turn 3 or 4 with the help of fetch lands and cantrips. Once he flipped, he could start helping you cast instants and sorceries out of your graveyard, and this is the ability that I think led to many people underrating the card to begin with, because we were all upset we had to actually pay the mana cost of the card from our graveyard. But that's also what Snapcaster Mage does, and that's a pretty busted card, so I don't know why we all got it so wrong. Giving you a second chance to cast powerful removal spells and even board sweepers, which he can now dodge because he's a planeswalker, is awesome. Jace is one of the most played cards in all of Standard for a while, and while he slowed down after the fetch lands rotated out because it was harder to flip him, he still managed to put up some consistent finishes in the last Standard format he was a part of. This included basically all of the Dragon control decks, Jeskai control, and mid-range, and even Bant Company decks, where again, you could hit Jace off of Collected Company, which was just insane. He has a single Grand Prix top 8 in Modern and a Grixis control deck from back in 2015, and in the last year or so he's started seeing play in Magic's most powerful format, Vintage, where he's appeared primarily in Monastery Mentor decks. Bad news for Jace, though. Monastery Mentor was just recently restricted in Vintage, and it seems unlikely the deck will survive following that announcement. At number 2, we have Archangel Allison, a card that nobody underrated like we did Jace. The moment she was spoiled, everyone knew she would see play. Basically, every block has at least one crazy pushed angel, right? But this one is insane, at least for Standard. 5 mana for a 4/4 with Flash, Flying, and Vigilance that makes your board indestructible when it comes into play is already good enough. That would see play already. But once another non-angel dies, she does 3 to the whole board, which sometimes can be a downside, but it's not usually going to be. You can usually sort of figure out when you want to do it. She sees play in most decks that can cast her, at least in the sideboard, and she hasn't really ceased seeing play since she was printed. Luckily, she's rotating out of Standard soon, but when she first came out, she was in Bant Company decks and Selesnya Tokens decks, and she was in Collected Company decks even though you couldn't hit her with Collected Company because she was that good. When those decks rotated out, she moved to Orzhov Control, Blue-White Flash, and most recently Mardu Vehicle and Mardu Ballista decks. Despite all of her power, Avacyn has not been able to transition to any other formats, though I do think the power level is there, and she could see play in Modern someday, though her mana cost may be just too prohibitive, and she may never put up another point again. And at number 1, we have, was there really any question? I'm sure when you guys started this video, you knew this would be number 1. It's one of the easier to predict number 1s than any one of these videos ever, and that is Delvar of Secrets. One of the most powerful commons ever, and many players' picks for the best 1-drop creature ever, which actually would be a good idea for a top 10. But anyway, Delvar of Secrets is basically a 1-mana 3/2 with flying, which is insane. Yes, I realize that it isn't literally a 1-mana 3/2 with flying. It starts as a 1/1, but every deck that has run Delvar of Secrets has an incredibly high number of instants and sorceries in it, meaning you have a good chance of flipping it off the first activation, and it is very likely it transforms, if not on turn 2, by turn 3. Delvar has seen play in every format possible, and every format has had, at one point or another, a deck with Delvar in its name, a true indication of just how powerful of a card this is. In Standard, its primary home was Blue-White Delvar, which is one of the more dominant decks of Standard in the time. In Modern, Delvar isn't a super popular deck right now, but there was a time when Grixis Delvar and Blue-Red Delvar were tier 1 decks in the format. In Legacy, it sees play and is still seeing play in Bug Delvar, Grixis Delvar, 4-color Delvar, and, well, you get the point. There's lots of different Delvar decks in Legacy. Even in Vintage it shows up, in the eponymous Blue-Red Delvar deck, and also in Canadian Threshold, a deck that doesn't have Delvar in the title. Delvar of Secrets seems like a good bet to hold on to the number 1 spot on this list forever, given its continued play and impressive track record. I don't really imagine anything in Ixalan is going to be printed that is going to have as big of an impact on all of Magic, every format of Magic, the same way Delvar of Secrets has. That does it for this week's MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and share it so others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch more MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.